Welcome to Charts Today. My name's David Linton, and today's edition for Monday, the 10th of April, comes to you from London. And we start by looking at currencies, then stock markets, commodities, and some US tech stocks. And interestingly, we start with the dollar index, and quite a run on Friday. We see here it really did jump, and that's taken us to 101.22 on the dollar index, and that's confirming really upside strength here. We're not quite through on the cloud yet. 101.50 is the level that we need to break, and ideally spend a few days above that level. But we do have this strong buying thrust. We still have the negative trend on the point and figure chart, bullish on the short term on the cloud chart, and we see these long-term targets kicking in here on the point and figure 1% chart. Remembering this is my long term, my medium term, and my short term. But interestingly, this will give us a new thrust target to the upside, so that is pretty bullish. And looking at the euro, conversely, it fell heavily on Friday, and that has confirmed a downside target of 102, so that's 3.69%. So we are now at the 105 level. This 10, we're 105.83. This 105 round level, 105.00, is really quite significant. And if we fall through that, that's a fall below February and March support. That would be bearish. So keeping an eye on that, that's what's really counts. And we see here we still have these long-term targets hanging over us, so to the downside. Japanese yen, we see the dollar is bullish above the yen. It's kicked above, but on the medium-term chart, it still has a lot of work to do. On the South African rand, the run continues with dollar strengthening. We just ticked up on this morning, so we haven't seen perhaps the move we've seen against other currencies with the US dollar, but the interesting thing is that the rand is pretty bearish, and we're coming through the cloud now, remembering that this is dollar strength. Looking at sterling, we see here that we are just back above the cloud here on the daily chart, but we fell away heavily on Friday as well in that 123.75 area. Key thing is, will we take out this 120 level and go into the teens? But medium term and long term charts suggest that that's likely to happen, and we've now got short term targets to 120, so 122 and 120, so it'll be interesting to see whether we get there. Looking at the euro sterling rate, fairly flat. They're both falling against the dollar, and the sterling Swiss franc chart, much the same thing. And looking at the Australian dollar, sterling just holding its strength there in the mid 160s. US stock markets were fairly flat on Friday, so ending the week with a slightly selling week with a red candle at the end here. But this move that we've seen in the start of the year is still really looking pretty bullish, and we are still bullish above all three time frames. Same with the Nasdaq, quite a sell-off in the middle of last week, but looking still pretty good above the cloud on all three time frames, as is the Dow and the Russell 2000 index. So US markets looking pretty good. The futures, the S&P future up very slightly this morning, and Nasdaq E-mini just up very slightly, but still below the cloud on the short-term chart. FTSE 100 looking quite good this morning again. Not a big move, but we're back above the cloud. That's what really counts. On the short-term chart, we're back here, and we've got these upside targets, so looking pretty good all round. And the FTSE 250 powering ahead, so the mid-caps in the UK at the moment looking very strong indeed. We're seeing the DAX above the cloud and bullish on all three time frames, and the Nikkei, although it's up nearly 0.75% today, it is a little bit worrying that we've been rolling out of this pattern to the sideways. Hang Seng Index just slightly down, and Shanghai holding its position above the cloud on the short-term chart. Indian market just selling off a little bit, but still bullish on all three time frames, and the Australian market bullish on all three time frames, looking very bullish indeed. Brent crude, we talked about crude oil last week, really powering ahead on this. You see these days of just marching right back into the range that we were trading at the start of the year, holding on to this 55 level at the moment, so it's really quite key. We've got upside targets and no real downside targets, although we are seeing still this $37 target on WTI still there hanging over us. We ideally need to see another sell-off to convince us that that target is valid. But interestingly, we are just seeing crude recovering, and the key thing is, can it get back above the cloud and hold that position? So $55 would be the level here. We need to break to new highs to unwind that downside target. US nat gas just selling off a bit again on Friday, finding support on the cloud at the moment with a lagging line, but finding resistance on the medium-term chart. So just really just stuck between the medium and short-term trends. Copper is below the cloud. Just looking at other commodities, coffee up quite strongly this morning, and taking us into bullish territory. So really quite key there. Looking at gold, gold had a very interesting day on Friday. It jumped in the morning and then fell away. So this was on the Syria bombing and then fell away by the end of the day, back to where we were. So that event is really just reflected in the chart as a short-term event. But interestingly, we do have still these upside targets. 1267 has been met, 1280 and then 1293 are the next sort of levels in the short term, and we've got this upside target of 1396 in the long term. These charts still, the point and figure charts, all just a little bit bearish at the moment. So the key thing is at the moment we are seeing that kicking through. On silver, we're seeing a similar thing where we've sold off, but we actually have activated a downside target here, so that is a little bit bearish as well. The Bund is still running higher, which is negative for yields, of course. The US Treasury yield did jump back into the 230s, back into positive territory on the 10-year. And then looking at tech stocks, Apple just selling off a bit on Friday. Google as well, just selling off, but holding on to its bullish position. Amazon has had an amazing run over the last couple of weeks, so just selling off as well, but still holding its bullish position. Facebook generating a downside target here, but still looking pretty bullish, and that's an amazing medium-term trend and lots of targets. Microsoft still looking bullish above the cloud, and Nvidia just still hanging at this 100 level. That's it for today. Until tomorrow, happy charting. See you then.